the engine gave a whine, and the pilot frowned and tapped the joystick. Now, the joystick is how smaller planes are steered. He was old and soldierly, with brisk nostril hair and a grey waxed moustache which seemed to reject the usual laws of gravity. He touched the throttle and the plane soared upwards higher into the clouds. Ooh, now what are we being told here? What do we now know about the pilot? Have a look at the text. Look at your notes. Let's pick up the clues. The pilot is frowning. Why is he frowning? Well, maybe he's a bit worried. He's tapping one of the instruments. Something's not quite right. He's worried, and the engine has changed its noise to a whine. A whine is a sort of moany sound. It's not a healthy sound. Now we know a bit about him. He's old. He's described as soldierly, a bit warlike, a bit old-fashioned perhaps. He's got nostril hair. That's an unusual detail to point out. So obviously it can be seen. He's older because he's got a grey moustache. And actually it must be turning upwards because usually things get pulled towards the earth with gravity. He's worried, but he does something about it and the plane goes up again. So far, so good. It was almost dark when Fred began to worry. Oh, look at that. A new paragraph. The action's moving on. And something is even more wrong than before. The pilot began to belch. That means burp. First quietly, then violently and repeatedly. His hand jerked and the plane dipped suddenly to the left. These words, jerked, dipped, suddenly. Things are changing really fast, and if a plane is dipping, it's not good news. Someone screamed behind Fred. We don't know who it is. Which one of those 3 children could it be? The plane lurched away from the river and over the canopy. The pilot grunted, gasped, and wound back the throttle, slowing the engine. He gave a cough that sounded like a choke. Now, all of a sudden, in our minds, we are thinking, what? What are we thinking? This pilot isn't well. He's beginning to burp violently and repeatedly. His hand is jerking. He's no longer in control of the plane. The plane is lurching away. And the pilot then makes some awful sounds, grunting, gasping, and a cough that sounds like a choke. The pilot is very, very ill. He's the only adult on the plane. Fred stared at the man. He was turning the same shade of grey as his moustache, which means that his skin is turning grey. And again, that's not good news. "Are you all right, sir?" he asked. "Is there something I can do?" Fighting for breath. What a great sentence starter. Before we even know what he's doing, that adverbial, fighting for breath, means that he's seriously ill now. The action is moving on. It's getting tenser. Fighting for breath, the pilot shook his head. He reached over to the control panel and cut the engine, which means he turned it off. The roar ceased. Really short sentence there. 3 words. All of a sudden, that's it. The plane has stopped in midair. The nose of the plane dipped downwards. The trees rose up. Now you imagine looking out of that plane. The trees aren't moving really. They're not coming up towards you. The plane is moving down towards them. "What's happening?" asked the blonde girl sharply. "What's he doing? Make him stop." The little boy in the back began to shriek. The pilot grasped Fred's wrist hard for a single moment, and then his head slumped against the dashboard. And the sky, which had seconds before seemed so reliable, gave way. That's an interesting way of putting the plane is going down. It seems that the sky was holding it up and now the sky gave way. The pilot is now unconscious. We don't know what's happened to him, but he can't even speak. And all of a sudden, that's the end of the chapter. I'll come to our last question. What are we left thinking at the end of the chapter? I wonder what you've written down. I wonder what conclusions you've come to. I think that the pilot might have had some sort of seizure, or something is wrong with part of his body. He's now unconscious. He may be dead. And the plane is heading down into the Amazon jungle, and it's getting dark. It's almost dark. What questions are you asking yourself right now? What could happen in the next chapter? Can you predict what could possibly happen? All you've got are the clues on those first 4 pages. Stop the video, have a little think, and write down what you think is going to happen next. Right, I'll share with you what I think is going to happen next. If I only had this to go on, this chapter to go on until here, I would think the following. First of all, I would think, well, there's an awful lot of the book to go. So actually, if those 4 children die in a plane crash, there's not really going to be a story to tell, is there? So I think somehow, at least some of them are going to survive by some miracle. It doesn't sound likely that the pilot is going to survive, I think, because he seems to have had a medical emergency. There's a lot of things going wrong with his breathing, with the colour of his skin, with his inability to talk, and the fact that he's making some very strange decisions about the plane. Normally, if you're a pilot, you want everyone to be safe, but suddenly he's cut the engine and the plane is going down. I think the children will have to learn how to survive, because if they survive a plane crash, they are left in the middle of the Amazon jungle, and you've got thousands of kilometres there. It's in the middle of nowhere. They've obviously been going a little bit, maybe an hour or so, because they took off towards the end of the day, but they crashed when it was pretty much dark. So I don't think anybody's going to find them for a little while. I wonder what you put. The next exercise you're going to do is answer some questions of your own on the next couple of slides. They test some of your VIPERS skills. But just bear in mind that read aloud, think aloud is really good. Once you've heard the story once, then to go back and reread it and ask yourselves all those questions so that you get a really good understanding of what's going on.